What happens when a member of the royal family loses his temper on live television in front of millions of viewers? In just 33 seconds, one comment turned a routine morning show interview into an explosive confrontation that nobody saw coming. Good Morning America. It was supposed to be a simple interview. Prince Harry was there to talk about his latest charity work, something he had done countless times before on countless other shows. The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and the studio audience was settling into their seats. Lara Spencer, the show's co-host, was ready with her notes and her signature smile. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but from the very first question, something felt off. Lara opened with warmth, the kind of warmth that had made her a favorite among morning television viewers for years. Prince Harry, welcome to Good Morning America. We're so happy to have you here this morning. Harry nodded, but his expression was hard to read. He sat back in his chair, arms crossed loosely, looking like he would rather be anywhere else. There was something in his eyes, something that suggested this was not going to go the way anyone expected. Thanks for having me, he said flatly. Lara continued, undeterred. She had interviewed thousands of people over the years. She knew how to handle a difficult guest. So, you're here to talk about the new foundation you've been working on. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about what inspired this project? It was a soft question, the kind designed to let a guest ease into the conversation. But Harry's response was anything but easy. Well, Lara, I think the inspiration is pretty obvious if you've been paying attention to what's happening in the world. Not everyone has the luxury of sitting in a comfortable studio talking about surface-level topics. The words hung in the air for a moment. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few people exchanged glances. Lara's smile faltered, just for a second, but she recovered quickly. She was a professional, after all. Of course, she said smoothly, and I think our viewers would love to hear more about the work you're doing to address those important issues. What specifically does the foundation focus on? Harry sighed, like the question itself was exhausting to him. He looked away from Lara for a moment, staring off into the distance before bringing his attention back. We focus on mental health, obviously, in something that gets talked about a lot, but rarely gets the real attention it deserves. People like to pretend they care, but when it comes down to it, most of the media just wants the headlines. Lara nodded, trying to keep the conversation on track. She was aware of the cameras, aware of the millions of people watching from home, aware that this was already starting to feel unusual. Mental health is incredibly important, and I think it's wonderful that you're using your platform to shine a light on it. Can you talk about some of the programs the Foundation has already implemented? Sure, Harry said, his tone dripping with something that sounded like condescension. We've got programs in schools, programs for veterans, programs for underserved communities. But honestly, talking about programs feels kind of hollow when the real issue is that society doesn't want to do the hard work of actually changing. The tension in the studio was starting to build. Lara kept her composure, her years of experience guiding her through what was quickly becoming a difficult interview. She shifted slightly in her seat, maintaining eye contact with Harry, even as he seemed to be looking everywhere but at her. I think a lot of people are trying to make a difference, she said gently. And it sounds like your foundation is doing some really meaningful work. What would you say to someone watching at home who wants to get involved? Harry leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. What would I say? I'd say don't just watch from your couch and think that's enough. Don't just share a post on social media and pat yourself on the back. If you actually care, you need to do something real. It was a jab, thinly veiled, and it didn't go unnoticed. Lara's smile was still there, but it was strained now. She glanced down at her notes, regrouping. The producers in the control room were watching nervously, wondering if they should cut to commercial early. That's a fair point, she said, her voice still calm. Action is what matters most. Speaking of action, you've been quite vocal about your own experiences with the media. How has that shaped the way you approach your work now? And that was when things started to spiral. Harry's expression darkened. His jaw tightened, He sat up straighter, and when he spoke, there was an edge to his voice that hadn't been there before. Shaped it? The media has tried to destroy everything I care about. They've lied, they've manipulated, they've invaded my privacy at every turn. So yeah, I'd say that's shaped my perspective quite a bit. Lara nodded sympathetically. She was trying to be understanding, trying to meet him where he was. I can only imagine how difficult that must be. But I think a lot of people admire the way you've been able to use those experiences to fuel your passion for helping others. Do they? Harry shot back, his voice rising slightly. Or do they just like the drama? Let's be honest, Lara. People tune in because they want to see the train wreck. They don't actually care about the work. They care about the gossip. They care about the scandal. That's what sells, right? The atmosphere in the studio had shifted completely. The crew members were exchanging glances, unsure of what to do. The audience was silent, watching the exchange unfold with wide eyes. This was not what anyone had signed up for. Lara took a breath, choosing her words carefully. She knew this was a pivotal moment. I think you might be surprised by how many people genuinely care about the causes you're fighting for, she said calmly. But I understand your frustration. Let's talk about something more positive. What's next for the Foundation? Any exciting projects on the horizon? Harry let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. It was bitter, sharp. Something more positive? That's the problem right there. Everyone wants everything to be positive and polished and perfect. Nobody wants to talk about the ugly truth. And nobody wants to admit that the system is broken. I think we're absolutely willing to talk about difficult topics, Lara replied, her voice still steady, but with a hint of steel beneath it now. That's what journalism is about. But we also want to give our viewers hope and inspiration. We want to show them that change is possible. Hope and inspiration, Harry repeated, shaking his head slowly. That sounds nice, Lara. It really does. But it's just another way of avoiding the real issues. You want to give people a feel-good story so they can go about their day without actually thinking about what's broken in the world. Lara's patience was wearing thin, but she kept her professionalism intact. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, her posture perfect, but there was a tightness around her eyes that betrayed her growing frustration. I respectfully disagree. I think hope and action can coexist, and I think our viewers are more than capable of thinking critically about important issues while also finding reasons to be optimistic about the future. Harry leaned back in his chair, arms crossed again. He looked at her with something that resembled pity, like she was naive for believing what she had just said. Well, that's a lovely sentiment, Lara. Really. But I've been doing this long enough to know that the media, including shows like this one, would rather keep things light and fluffy than dig into anything that might make people uncomfortable. That was it. That was the line. Lara's expression shifted, and for the first time, her frustration broke through the professional veneer. With all due respect, Prince Harry, she said, her voice firm, I think you're making some pretty broad assumptions about what we do here. We've covered plenty of difficult, uncomfortable topics on this show. We've interviewed people who are fighting for change in their communities. We've highlighted issues that don't get enough attention, and we've done it all while trying to be respectful to our guests and our viewers. Harry raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Respectful? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels more like you're trying to control the narrative. Keep everything safe. Keep everything sanitized. Control the narrative? Lara's voice was sharp now, cutting through the studio like a knife. I invited you on this show to talk about your foundation and the work you're doing. You're the one who's turned this into a critique of everything we do here. You're the one who's made this adversarial. Maybe because it needs to be adversarial, Harry fired back. Maybe someone needs to say what everyone else is too polite to say. Maybe someone needs to call out the hypocrisy. The studio was completely silent now. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of the unraveling interview. You could hear the hum of the lights overhead, the quiet rustle of papers from the crew. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. This was unprecedented. Lara took another breath, and you could see her making a decision in real time. She was done trying to salvage this. She was done being diplomatic. "Look," she said, her tone measured but firm. "I understand that you've had some frustrating experiences with the media, but I don't think it's fair to paint everyone with the same brush. We're trying to have a constructive conversation here, and I'd appreciate it if you could meet me halfway." Harry stared at her for a long moment, and then he said something that nobody expected. Something that would be replayed over and over again in the hours and days to come. "You know what, Lara? I don't think you actually care about any of this. I think you care about your ratings. I think you care about keeping your audience happy, so they'll come back tomorrow and watch the next celebrity interview, or cooking segment, or whatever fluff you've got lined up. But caring about the real issues? That's just the act you put on." The accusation landed like a bomb. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that filled the studio. The producers in the control room were scrambling, talking over each other, debating whether to cut the feed. And Lara, who had handled countless difficult interviews with grace and poise, who had navigated every kind of awkward moment television could throw at her, had reached her limit. Her face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with anger. Real, righteous anger. She leaned forward in her chair, her eyes locked on Harry's. "That is completely out of line," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You don't know me. You don't know what I care about. You don't know the work I've done, or the stories I've told, or the people I've fought for. And you don't get to sit here and insult me on my own show." Harry shrugged, completely unbothered by her reaction. If anything, he seemed almost pleased with himself. "I'm just telling the truth. If that's insulting to you, maybe you should think about why that is." Lara stood up from her chair, her movements deliberate and controlled. Her jaw was tight, her hands clenched at her sides. "You know what? I think we're done here." Harry looked up at her, and for the first time, there was a flicker of surprise in his expression. "Excuse me? I said we're done," Lara repeated, her voice steady, but ice cold. Every word was clear, deliberate. "I invited you here as a guest to have a meaningful conversation about your foundation and the important work you claim to care so much about. And you've spent the entire interview attacking me, attacking this show, and attacking the people who work here. I'm not going to sit here and let you continue to do that." Harry scoffed, the smirk returning to his face. "So that's how it is? The second someone challenges you, the second someone says something you don't like, you shut them down? That's your idea of journalism?" "No," Lara said firmly, her voice rising just slightly. "This isn't about challenging me. This is about respect. Basic human respect. And you've shown none of it. Not to me, not to this show, not to anyone watching. So I'm asking you to leave." The studio erupted in whispers. The crew members were frozen, unsure of what to do. Some of them had worked on this show for years and had never seen anything like this. Harry sat there for a moment, looking like he was deciding whether to argue further, whether to push back one more time. Then, slowly, he stood up. "Fine," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I didn't want to be here anyway. This whole thing was a waste of my time." He reached up and pulled off his microphone with a sharp yank, the clip making a loud snapping sound. He tossed it onto the chair behind him without a second glance. The sound echoed through the studio, punctuating the moment. Lara didn't move, didn't flinch. She just stood there, watching him, her expression unreadable. "You're making a mistake," Harry said as he started to walk off the set, his footsteps heavy on the studio floor. "The only mistake," Lara called after him, her voice clear and strong, was thinking this interview was going to be productive. Harry stopped at the edge of the set and turned back to face her, His face was red now, his composure slipping for the first time. "You'll regret this. Trust me." Lara looked him right in the eye, unflinching. "I doubt that very much." And with that, Prince Harry walked off the Good Morning America set. The cameras captured every step, every movement. The audience sat in stunned silence, some with their hands over their mouths, others whispering to the people next to them. Lara remained standing, her composure never breaking, even as the weight of what had just happened settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. She turned to face the camera, and when she spoke, her expression was calm, but resolute. "We're going to take a quick break," she said to the viewers at home. "We'll be right back." The producers called for the commercial break, and the red lights on the cameras finally went dark. The studio crew stood in shocked silence, processing what they had just witnessed. Some were already pulling out their phones, texting friends, wondering if what they saw had actually happened. Lara sat back down in her chair, her hands folded in her lap, her face unreadable. She took a long, slow breath. One of the producers rushed over, her headset still on, her eyes wide. "Are you okay? That was intense." Lara nodded slowly. "I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine." "That was incredible," the producer said quietly, almost in awe. "The way you handled that. The way you stood your ground. I've never seen anything like it." Lara didn't respond right away. She just stared at the empty chair across from her, the chair where Prince Harry had been sitting moments before. The chair where everything had fallen apart. She could still feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, could still hear his words echoing in her head. In the green room, Harry was pacing back and forth, his face flushed with anger. His team was huddled in the corner, trying to figure out what to do next. One of them tried to approach him, but he waved them off. "She had no right to do that," he snapped, his voice loud in the small room. "No right to kick me off like that. Who does she think she is?" One of his advisors spoke up cautiously, aware that Harry was on edge. "Harry, maybe we should think about how to handle this moving forward. The optics of what just happened, they're not great." "The optics?" Harry spun around to face them, his eyes blazing. "I don't care about the optics. She's the one who should be worried about how this looks. Kicking a guest off her show in the middle of an interview? That's going to blow up in her face. People are going to see this for what it is." But even as he said it, there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Because deep down, somewhere beneath the anger and the indignation, he knew the truth. He knew that he had crossed a line. He knew that his behavior had been out of bounds. And he knew that when the clips of this interview started circulating online, when people started weighing in with their opinions, the world wasn't going to see it the way he wanted them to. Back on the set, the commercial break was ending. The crew was resetting, adjusting cameras, preparing for the next segment. Lara took a sip of water from the glass on the table beside her, straightened her notes, and prepared to face the cameras again. When the red lights came back on, when the show returned to air, she was the picture of professionalism. "Welcome back," she said to the viewers, her voice warm and steady, as if nothing had happened. But then she addressed it head on. "As you just saw, we had to cut that interview short. I want to apologize to anyone who tuned in this morning expecting a different kind of conversation. We always strive to have respectful and meaningful discussions on this show, and unfortunately, that wasn't possible today." She paused, letting her words sink in. The camera held on her face, capturing the sincerity in her expression. "But I also want to say this. We have a responsibility to our viewers, to our guests, and to ourselves to maintain a certain standard of respect and decency. And when that standard isn't met, when someone crosses a line, we have to make difficult decisions. I stand by the decision I made today." The audience, which had been silent throughout the entire ordeal, erupted into applause. It started with a few people in the front row, then spread through the entire studio like a wave. People were clapping. Some were even standing. Lara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, and nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the applause. "Thank you. Now, let's move on to something a little more uplifting, shall we? We've got a wonderful segment coming up next." And just like that, the show continued. The next segment began, the audience settled down, and Good Morning America moved forward. But the moment, the confrontation, the explosive ending of that interview, it was already spreading like wildfire across the internet. Clips were being shared on every social media platform. Commentary was pouring in from every corner of the world. Some people sided with Lara, praising her for standing her ground and refusing to tolerate disrespect. Others defended Harry, claiming he was just speaking his truth and challenging the media establishment. But one thing was undeniable. In 33 seconds, everything had changed. A routine interview had become a cultural moment. And Lara Spencer, the host who had been pushed to her breaking point, had shown the world exactly what it means to stand up for yourself when respect is nowhere to be found.